I guess we're technically in the deep south now. We're near the Mississippi border, southern Georgia, and we're at Kolomoki Mounds. Now, previously in these other sites we've been visiting, those are Mississippian cities. Remember, warlike culture, they had fortifications around their towns. This is a woodland era settlement. This is Hopewellian. The Weedon and Swift Creek people constructed this city, Kolomoki.
Yes, the Swift Creek and Weedon Island cultures, both a peoples who were a part of the larger Hopewellian tradition. The Swift Creek inhabited the southeast from 100 AD to 800 AD, and not much is known of them, but that they had very distinctive pottery styles. They were generally nomadic, but did build permanent settlements and were good farmers of squash and beans. They built the first settlement at Kolomoki, which was later further developed by the Weedon Island peoples, who then, during occupation by migrating Mississippians, transitioned into a culture we call the Kolomoki. Makes enough sense, right?
This city was planned. There were no people here. It was planned and plotted out first. There were people around, but not centralized here. But a group of them got together and said, we need a city, and we need it here for some kind of reason. It was important. So what they did was they built two mounds a mile apart from each other on the east and the west that were astronomically aligned to the rising and the setting of the sun during the solstices. And halfway through those two mounds, they built a central plaza. And then the people came and cultivated and populated this massive city, which was probably the biggest city in North America at the time.
Kolomoki grew over time. The initial planned settlement of the Swift Creek was first a more ceremonial center, but evolved into a permanent settlement by the time the Weedon Island had their hand in its development. And at the height of the newly emerged Kolomoki culture, during the last 100 years or so of Kolomoki use, it was at its peak population of at least 2,000 people in the city center alone.
And what we see from the excavations is, first they lived within this central area of the city, gravitating towards its influence, the spiritual power of its leaders. And then as that power waned, the people went back to being nomadic again, basically. What we see on the excavations is the homes moved further and further away from the central parts of the city, and they're cache pits.
A cache pit is your woodland-era root cellar or refrigerator. Indigenous everywhere, not just here at Kolomoki, stored goods in deep and well-insulated and well-capped pits that could keep food and grain well-preserved for years. Excavating cache pits are a great way to understand a culture. It's like coming over to your house and seeing what's in your fridge, and then being able to ascertain you're part of a consumer society of bottom-rung factory workers and foundational support pillars for a minority wealth population who, unlike you, aren't addicted to saturated fats and processed sugars that are the sole motivation for your slaving away at your 12-hour-a-day, 6-day-a-week shifts at the beef tallow factory. So, at the twilight years of occupation, the cache pits at Kolomoki
became very, very large and very deep, which signifies that they probably were not here often, that they would store large amounts of goods for the next time they'd be passing through the area to access them again. So it's really interesting. So for some reason, around 100 AD, a group of influential people inspired nomadic hunter-gatherers to settle in one spot. And then that certain religion they practiced, or that certain spirituality practice, or the importance that they had, the gravity that they had, waned off after a few hundred years, and the people just lost interest in living here and decided to become a nomadic society once again.
Notable features at the site are the Temple Mound, which measures 56 feet high and 325 by 200 feet wide at its base, and the mound was free of vegetation and covered in clay. For most of its lifespan, it was covered in white clay, but for the latter years of occupation, it was changed to a coating of red clay. This definitely signified a change in the culture. There's no evidence of structures existing atop the mound, nor is there evidence of any ramp or stairs leading up to it. So its purpose was perhaps more to be an imposing and giant structure, rather than as something to be occupied or for ceremonial use. Its other remaining mound is Mound D, a conical burial mound that is filled to the brim with pottery molded in effigy shapes of deer, quail, and owls. This one was covered in yellow clay.
We're standing on top of the Temple Mound. Behind me, not many of them are clear, as many have eroded down significantly, but there are 7 more mounds surrounding this plaza. Most of them burial mounds. And it speaks to kind of the complex, difficult nature of understanding these places, of archaeology, of how we learn about these places. The archaeologists have done great work exploring these sites, giving us information about these sites, and working towards the preservation of these sites. But a lot of that archaeological knowledge that we have comes from an era ranging from the 1920s to the 1950s, where archaeologists were pseudo treasure hunters. Not Indiana Jones types, but definitely looking for adventure, searching for mystery, and not necessarily always respecting the sites entirely. They're really just destroying them. They were just tearing them apart to get to whatever they could. So this site, the museum, is built on top of a excavated mound. You can go inside the mound, you can see the burial, you can see the burial pits, which is fantastic information, stuff that we don't get to see, but also it is disturbing a person's grave.
Yep, they built a museum over an excavated mound, and here it is. Everything here was an intentional and planned project. Every stone was placed with precision and intent. These ones that you see in circular shapes are where human remains or goods were interred in the center. For many years of the museum's existence, the skeletal remains of the buried dead were on site in plain view, but have since been reburied in other areas out of respect for the dead.
Gas station, middle of nowhere, has a giant bucket of really good, authentic greens. This is $2. Not a pork belly. At a fucking gas station.